The first person that I want to talk about in relation to the Sons of Liberty is this man here, Colonel John Durkee. This man has become kind of a hero of mine, and he is the subject of a biography that I'm writing on his life. He is someone who has been largely forgotten to history, and he has been written about in other works, but there is no definitive volume on his life. And he lived quite an incredible life. Someone who was born in Windham, Connecticut, but he relocated to Norwich. He's buried in the Norwich Town Colonial Burying Ground. But he was the leader of the Norwich Sons of Liberty by 1765. This was between him and Hugh Ledley, as well as Israel Putnam of Connecticut, were three of the biggest figures throughout Connecticut to lead the Sons of Liberty. And this was one of those men who was a veteran of the French and Indian War. He served throughout the entirety of the war. He earned the rank of major by the war's end. And once the American Revolution breaks out, he takes over first the 20th, actually should say 20th Continental Regiments in 1776. That regiment was supposed to be commanded by Benedict Arnold, but he was in Canada at the time, so he never actually commanded the unit. By 1777, he had led the 4th Connecticut Regiment and was injured at the Battle of Monmouth in 78. He did not see much active service after that. He dies around the age of 52, or 54 rather. After a musket ball had shattered his right hand, he really was effectively disabled because of that. He wasn't able to perform functions on the battlefield. And the first thing I want to ask for you is, what do you think of the portrait here? It's a really beautiful portrait. Would you believe that this portrait was painted 2 years ago? It almost looks like it was done by Gilbert Stuart, right? Yeah. And I mention this because this will, if all goes according to plan, this will be the cover of the book. And it's a very special portrait because John Durkee, he still has living descendants. There's two individuals that I've become very well acquainted with over the past few years. Susan Boone Durkee, who lives in Reading, Connecticut. She's a professional portrait artist. She's painted official likenesses of Supreme Court justices and very high level people. She's entirely self-taught too, which is just incredible to me. Really incredible. She and her brother Rob are descendants of him and the family. Wow. And we were able to coordinate ourselves together at Rob's desire. He said, you know, I would love to see a portrait of our great ancestor. Their father, who was also named Robert Durkee, was also very interested in the family history and the history of this man. So long story short, Susan painted this lovely posthumous portrait of John Durkee, and was unveiled on July 4th, 2021 at the Leffingwell House Museum. So the portrait itself was donated to the museum, so it's within our collection, and it is really just quite a lovely piece that she based off of, that she tried to channel Gilbert Stuart. Yes?
You raised the issue. Is that accurate? I mean, we know.
It's as accurate as it can be. Unfortunately, there are no official likenesses of John Durkee. I managed to find 3.
He's a brother then?
Very close, right? I managed to find 3 unofficial likenesses of John Durkee, one of which came from Appleton's Cyclopedia of American Biography, of which John Durkee was in there. It was pretty much anybody who existed were in these volumes. And I don't know who illustrated that picture that was in the encyclopedia. Yes?
It looks like there's a battle scene behind it. Which battle was that, do we know?
It's meant to represent Monmouth, a crucible battle that was fought in 78. But more generally, yes, it is meant to demonstrate a battlefield. Yeah, that's correct.
That last bullet, I mean, they weren't fighting in Wyoming. I mean, that's in the state of Wyoming.
No, Wyoming Valley, Pennsylvania. Yeah, there are a number of battles fought there, absolutely. We did do some historic research to determine what exactly John Durkee not just would have looked like, but what he would have worn as an officer. As a colonel, he would have worn something very similar to this. And this is depicting him as if he would have been wearing his colonel's regimentals in 1779. After 1779, there were official uniform regulations that were enacted by General Washington. And among those regulations were Connecticut officers and Connecticut regiments were wearing the blue coats with the white facings, just like you see back there. And so this is an imagining of what he would have looked like wearing those regimentals. The epaulet was also designed off of an official epaulet that does exist. It was worn by one of his colleagues, Brigadier General Jedediah Huntington. The original epaulets still exist. They were sold at auction recently, but that epaulet is based off of that design.